up for a number of years, and basically was viewed as having two sides to it. However, it was in three poles, so it was more in the shape of a triangle. And their question was, our ordinance now reads that the size of a sign cannot exceed 40 or 84 square feet of surface area. Now, we measure that on each side, so theoretically, a sign has two sides of 84 square feet. But in that particular sign, we ran into the situation where the two sides of the signs weren't back to back. They had an angle of about 45, 50 degrees, and so theoretically, you could see both sides of the sign at the same time, therefore making that sign twice as large. I would hope that we could include some verbiage here to regulate that, to say that if the two sides aren't back to back, then you measure both sides of the sign as opposed to only just the one side, like it would be on a back-to-back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what section was that again?
That's 66-48 on page 10 in the middle of the page,
On that point,
on item 2, yes.
on that point, in the definitions, we did include, if you turn to page 31, under surface area of the sign, we include the double-sided sign and a V-shaped sign, and stated that the V-shaped sign has to be calculated based upon the two sides of the sign, whereas the double-sided sign is calculated only off of the one side. Now, if you want to prohibit V-shaped signs, I mean, that's up to y'all. So this wouldn't necessarily prohibit it, but it would just, it would count both sides.
In other words, the two sides would have to equal the
Exactly what I was hoping, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe reference, adding a reference to, well, I don't know.
It's there.
It's there, okay. I'm good then, thank you. Page 14, under menu board signage, items 2 and 4. Item 2 says the surface area shall not exceed 60 square feet. And then item 4 says the maximum number of 2 signs per establishment. I just wanted to clarify that the 60 square feet is whether they have 1 or 2. It's not 2 of 60 square feet. Is that the way staff would interpret that? That 60 square feet would be for both signs if they choose to have 2? Or would it be 2 60
The
square
way
foot
that
signs?
it's worded here, I would say it would be for one.
60 each.
Yeah. Which would be like a 10 by 6 sign. So, I mean, I can clarify that.
We're adding the word each would clarify that. Right. Yeah, it's a menu board, so it's the rest, like a drive-through. Okay.
So, am I amending that at this
Yeah.
point to?
Have we checked to see if most of them that we have are in that area of 6 by 10? Most of them are smaller than that, I would think, so.
Yes, but remember, we're incorporating the sign frame and all of that kind of stuff in this, so that's what makes it a little bit more complicated. That's why it's higher than that. I mean, typically, if you look at 8 by 8, that's 64 square feet. So typically, they're going a little bit up to like 8 feet, but narrower.
So is this something that you want us to go ahead and put in here for clarity?
I would think it would be important to clarify it. I mean, I'm not necessarily wanting it to, I think 60 each would be fine, but I could see how you could interpret it either way, because later on, when you talk about the gas station canopy sign, we do limit it to 20 square feet, but that's total, not per sign. So it is, I think we need to be consistent with how we're applying that. The same thing happens on the top of page 15 under canopy sign, where item 2 says the surface area of the signage of the canopy, not the canopy itself, shall not exceed 64 square feet, and then item 4 says that they can have 1 per pedestrian way, not to exceed, with a maximum of 2 signs. And so we're right back to the same, does the 60 square feet be each sign or 60 square feet of signage collectively? Because the way the first one reads, surface area of the signage, implies to me it's the total signage, whether it's in 1 or 2 signs.
Councilman, am reading it entirely opposite, where it's per sign.
So maybe we should
So-
clarify that.
Okay,
Then
so
we don't
I'll-
have to read it one way or the other, just make it
Change
say.
it from signage to, from sign to signage, instead of just using the word sign.
Well, all of the corrections, if you look at the red line version, changed all of the words signs to signage. That's all in the red line, all throughout the entire document. There's dozens and dozens of them.
I
yeah.
don't understand why it was done, but, because you're right, it sounds like a collective group, well, signs with the S.
Yeah.
That is,
I just think it needs to be clarified. I don't have a preference one way or the other. I think that if you're gonna have two menu boards in a drive-through restaurant, one is the beginning before, while you're in line, the other one right there where you're placing your order, makes sense that they're not gonna be 30 square feet, because that's really kinda tiny. Especially when you consider the base and the monument and the whole work. So I don't have a problem with two of them 60. I just wasn't reading it that way, and I thought I would bring it up, and in both cases.
We could just change the language to say surface area of each sign on the
Yeah,
canopy.
adding the word each
Each,
clarifies it
Each
completely.
sign, and do the same on the other one. So just change signage to on each sign.
well, how many signs can be on a canopy?
Well, it says here one or two,
Maximum two.
maximum two.
One per pedestrian way with a maximum of two.
Oh, okay.
So if you're on a corner lot, and you have two canopies, you would have one sign on each canopy.
Okay,
But if you're not on a corner, then it would just be one,
okay.
right? Next.
Next, okay, bottom of page 17. That's what we're here for, right?
Yes, sir.
Under directional signage, I just want to mention that the planning and zoning struggled with this one, because we're talking about directional signage, not marketing or advertising signs located within a private property to help direct traffic. And they were kind of concerned that we might have large properties, and if we limited them to one, it wouldn't really help them circulate their traffic and directional signage. But then they went back and forth a lot of times on trying to determine, well, would it be one? How about two? Well, what about a certain number per acre? And they never really came to a conclusion, except at the end, they came back and directed our staff to come back and say, limit one, subject to the granting of an exemption by the commission for unusual site conditions. Thought I'd just mention that because they really did put a lot of thought into this. And I'm thinking of myself of, for example, the CVS that I know is under a separate development agreement, not this kind of thing. But they have a lot of directional signage in there. They have an enter and they have a do not enter, for their drive-through, so you don't go backwards. They have, and they're not on a parking, they're not in an area that's 3, 4, 5 acres in size. They're a small area, but they still need multiple directions. And I just, it seemed a little restrictive to me. They added that extra about granting an exception, and maybe, I just thought I'd bring that up to council to consider as we come back to it in the future, of whether or not that would, that's an area that they struggled with and that they might need that. So those were the areas that I wanted to bring up, and my comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alex. Good job. Bert?
Okay, I'm gonna try to be brief here. I'd like to thank staff also for making this more concise. It went from 50 pages to 32 pages. I had a question about section 66-44, the duration that a banner can be up. It says it's 30 calendar days with a maximum of 3 banner permits issued per entity per calendar year. Now, does that mean per entity? Does that mean that if it's the same business or nonprofit or something or like that? I mean, does it mean it's the same sign? Or is it, they can put up only 3 signs a year? Do you understand what I'm saying? Although they might all 3 be different.
They could only receive 3 banner permits per year.
Okay. It doesn't matter if they're different signs. If it's from the same entity, you can only have 3 per year. Is that correct?
3 permits per year, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, and then
So a total of 90
90 days of signage.
days of signage.
Okay. And then, and then moving back a little bit, back to the, hold on, give me a second here. Back to the CEVMS signage. You know, we have one here at City Hall, and I did do some research, and I couldn't find another city our size that has that type of signage. But I would like to get a feel from council to see if they would be willing to maybe look at possibly allowing it somehow. I don't have an answer to the somehow, but I would like to see how you guys would feel about possibly allowing it somehow. Got any feedback on that, or can I ask for that?
Sure. Yeah, because this is discussion,
What page
but,
are we on?
but the
I'm
some,
on page 4,
the
on
somehow,
the under prohibited signs.
yeah, the somehow would be
What is
totally
the
up to you
question?
guys. So
Yes, sir, I
you'd
know.
have to propose some specific
Right.
thoughts on how it would be regulated.
Right.
And how it would be operated,
Well,
because,
see, I did some research, and I can't find a city our size that allows it
right,
at this time.
yeah.
So,
yeah,
I mean,
we've
how
seen
would
the
you,
same
I mean,
thing.
if I came up with something and brought it to you, but would you at least look at it?
Hey, it's these guys. So
Or
would-
are you,
I would
are you
say
totally
sure.
against it?
I'm not interested in.
Because I don't want to do the work if you guys don't want to even consider it.
I'm not interested in it.
You're not interested.
No.
I guess the only thing I'm opposed to it on the right-of-way. I think it's just a distraction on the right-of-way. I would be open to looking at it if it was a menu board at a drive-through, and they used it for a menu board that's not on the right-of-way. I would at least think about it. They are bright and they are distracting, I think. So I'm not for them on the right-of-way.
But to me, it's the future. I mean, these signs like at the festival grounds and they're antiquated. I mean, and you see these large signs that are on the highways now, like 1604, and I don't think they're ugly. I don't think they're bright. I think they're informative. They're a lot better than the old signs that were up there. So, but I mean, if you guys don't want to even consider it, I don't want to do the work to bring something to you.
What does the high school have? They have.
They
kind of a
have one.
rolling-
They have one, but it's inside, inside their property.
And it's one color
Yeah.
left.
But if you're not interested
Well,
in it,
does the
then
Hello's Festival Association want one up? Or do they
in the
have
future,
one?
of course, we could put more information there, and any business could. But see, I think what's gonna hold a lot of people back is they're very, very expensive. Take ours for example. So,
So you say no, you say maybe, you guys?
I'm interested, yeah.
Are you?
I am,
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
Well, being the one on the council who's probably the most restrictive on signs, I would want to initially say no. However, I think that, and your argument that says that they're coming doesn't necessarily mean we have to succumb to it.
yes, sir. I understand that.
The problem that I have with them, I agree with Councilmember Fredericks in the fact that when you're driving, to me, they're relatively distracting, to include ours, which I know we all voted for, but I have second thoughts on. Oh, yes, Mr. Paula did not, okay. And to me, before they could even be considered, I would have some heavy restrictions on them, which would make it to the point where all the businesses would come and want them all over the place and would want variance after variance after variance after variance. And I think that would become more of a problem for us than a help once you open that door. I sympathize with the businesses and/or nonprofits in the city and area who want to have multiple events flashing in front of everybody to get as much attention as they can. I just think that takes us down the path of being a cluttered and distracting view that is not what we're trying to portray. So I think at this time, I would have to say I would not be too open with it. But down the road, maybe we'll be overpowered with it, but I think we would have to do things like you can't have it running past dark, you can't have but one color, you can't have a flashing, you can't have anything but your signal has to be on a certain length of time, you have to.
See, that's the work.
And you do all of that, and then you're gonna be inundated with, well, but I really want two colors, one
Yeah.
color's not good enough, and how do you regulate when they shut it off at 9? Well, 9 o'clock is different at different time of the year. 9 o'clock is dark, and they're very bright, They're all, you know, and so I think that by the time you put all the restrictions, I don't know that we need to go there right now, not in my opinion.
Okay.
Well, if it's any consolation, we haven't had any interest or request for any to this date.
Well, actually, we did. We had
Yeah.
the one down there
On
off
Braun
of
Road.
Braun in 1604.
He had
They
it.
actually had the box up there already. and
Right,
we turned
right,
them
and I
down.
was thinking, and he thanked us for.
And Our Lady
for the
Guadalupe
input.
on their property requested one that was turned down as well.
Right. But I'm talking the other, you know, businesses along Bandera Road and all. The guy on Braun Road actually sent us some suggestions, if we ever considered it, that he'd seen in other cities, and I still have that also, so I'll get with Bert on that.
Very good suggestion.
Anything else, Bert?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
A couple more things, and I'll try to be brief. On page 19, number 2, I don't understand that paragraph. I'm sorry. It says the city may require the removal, relocation, or reconstruction, but then we have to pay for it.
Under state law, if the city were to adopt a new ordinance, changing signs, and one of them is a non-conforming use sign,
Yes, sir.
the city can say, you know what, we want you to take it down, but we're gonna compensate you for taking that sign down. Most, you allow for non-conforming signs to continue, but let's just say there's a sign that you really, the city council wants to get rid of, and it has non-conforming rights. This allows you to buy, to calculate the amount so that you can have that sign removed. You'll have to pay the owner, but it allows you to remove that sign. It's basically a way to shortcut the non-conforming use rights.
Okay.
But this is
So it's a
basically
state law.
copying the state provision,
Okay,
correct?
so that's why I didn't understand it. Okay,
Do they have to agree? Can they say, I don't want to take it down, even though you're
If the city
compensating them?
calculates the reasonable amount for the cost for removal, they really don't have a right to disagree. They can sue you afterwards, but once you calculate what you believe is the reasonable amount, and it's done by really an independent body, an independent board that will help the city calculate the cost, they don't have a right to say no.
Okay,
Kind of like eminent domain, isn't it?
It's very similar to eminent domain with
yeah,
a sign.
that's what I was thinking, yeah.
oh, okay, all right.
This is different than a sign that is damaged more than 60%. You
Yes.
can't get permitted to go.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. And one more thing, I promise, okay, I
It's
promise.
it's okay, that's why we're here.
Councilmember Fredericks brought up the flag, the wave, the blade, under prohibited signage, is teardrops, banners. I mean, to me, I don't understand why we can't find a way to do like our banner permit and at least maybe permit these types of signage for maybe, let them have it for a couple of weekends or something like that. Because a lot of these businesses around here want to use them, but they can't. I mean, they're completely prohibited. I mean, even on their own property. And to me, I think that's overregulation. It would be a lot more work for our people, but would you guys consider any type of permit?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's exactly the kind of clutter and
Same thing?
distraction that we don't need, yeah.
I
I mean,
agree.
this is why we moved to Helotes, was not to be around that.
well,
I agree.
okay, so I guess I outvoted again.
I think on a temporary basis, I mean, you know, in
once
a
you
special
leave
event, I
temporary.
think could be, you know, should be permissible, just like a banner.
So they're completely prohibited. Okay. Well,
12 months are on a tract of 48 inches or larger.
yeah. That, okay. But, I mean, I'm just trying to, I mean, I've always been, I've tried to be pro-business and trying to help them out as much as we can. I think I know it's cluttering probably if we let them keep it up, but why
So
not?
you- So you're talking maybe a weekend sale or weekend
Yeah.
event or something
Yeah,
like that?
yeah.
So, and limit the number of signs that would be on
I
a
mean,
particular
like
property?
like Gavin Steele, of course, they didn't, they're in our ATJ. Gavin Steele had a bunch of the teardrop, or what do you call it, the, whatever they're
Banner
called.
flags.
The banner flag signs. And he went ahead and spent the money for them, and they're not cheap. And he had about 4 or 5 of them lined up inside his fence for, you know, to promote his business. And he had them up on weekends. And of course, he was made to take them down. I think that's too much. We're limiting him too much. We're not being pro-business there. And I disagree with it. I mean, if we let everybody have one, yeah, it would be cluttered.
But how do you control that?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Everybody can have one the minute you put it in the ordinance.
I think just like,
So
we
it's
control-
all-
next to
just
their
like we
N-
control
LED?
banners, I think the city does a great job at controlling the banners, getting the permit, going through that process. We do that monthly now at CASA, and the banners you're referring to, Bert, I agree. I mean, just for that one-night event, and draw some attention off the street, you know, to come and frequent the event. It can be handled just like banners, in my opinion.
No? Yes?
Well, we can talk about it, bring back your proposal,
Okay.
and we'll submit it to
Okay.
council and then get some feedback.
I'm
on
not
it.
trying to clutter up Helotes, I'm just, it's a fine line I'm walking here. We're walking here, to me. So, I mean,
Anything else?
did I promise? I'm
No,
done.
go ahead.
No, I'm done, I really am. Thank you.
Cynthia, you're up.
Okay, the Christmas light situation does not belong in the sign ordinance. That belongs under the light illumination. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that out there, because you were talking about
Well,
throwing that.
it's called decorations, is
Exact-
in here.
But is decorations a sign?
Well, it's in here.
Decorations, temporary decorations or displays? Okay, okay, I see. The thing is, how do we decide this, if something is a Christmas light, or just like, I remember one time when we had, the Helotes Creek Winery, in Ed's property, and she had the lights streaming in the back, she had the bulbs, would you call, those aren't, to me, aren't Christmas lights, but they're lights, and I thought it was kind of a nice ambiance for in the evening for when you're drinking wine.
Yep.
So is that what you're talking about?
No, I was just identifying that it's in here, it's specific to the fact that it says Christmas holiday decorations or special event decorations. I was just noting that they called it temporary, but there was no definition to that, that's all. I'm not trying to identify that stringing a string of lights up is gonna be considered that. But we all have seen situations to where you end up with something that's very clearly specific to a holiday, and it's there for month after month after month. And it's not a matter of just lighting up a patio or something of that nature with something that doubles as a holiday decoration. I mean, it's specific to holiday. I'm not picking on anybody in particular, just like with the LED. I mean, I'm not saying that. I was just reading the ordinance as it was and trying to think, how could we enforce that, or what would happen, kind of trying to think ahead, because that's what we're trying to do here, is to get ahead of the problem before we end up behind it. I don't have any example or specific. I just thought, should we have a definition in here, or not? I mean, that's fine. I'm fine either way, but
So what bothers you is the word temporary with no.
with no, what is temporary? I mean, we have a
Right.
definition for temporary signs.
Okay.
And all of the rest of the things that are permitted and allowed have a criteria. I'm not saying they need to be permitted, I wouldn't think so. But at some point in time, if they're still up in July, somebody ought to be able to say something other than look at the ordinance and say, well, it's silent, so I guess you can do what you want to.
Yeah,
That's all I'm saying, is just address it.
okay,
We can be very reasonable about it.
okay. Anything else, Cynthia?
On that particular, the thing about the murals bothers me. I don't think we should, I think that murals should not be under the exempted signage. I'm not sure they should be under prohibited signage. I think that perhaps they should be under the creative ordinance, their creative sign consideration by council approval. So if we're gonna be because, that and the other thing you were talking about, the bread thing, whatever that thing's called, graffiti on the wall, that should be under that creative thing, if we're gonna,
Yeah, we can move that.
yeah.
We do regulate, when they come to the city, the planning and zoning looks at the site plan and their building plan, and does involve color and design. Would that be an area that we could talk about? I mean, if a company comes in and puts up a building and they put, nice limestone, and then they decide to come back later and paint it red and white stripes, can we tell them they can't?
I would hope so,
I would hope so, but I don't know.
yeah.
City
the only
Administrator,
oth-
can we?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. The only other thing that I had is this is on page 7, under the flag. I was a little confused about this one on, flag signage, purpose to display federal, state, county, or municipal flags, or the display of commercial flags by business entities. And then it says limited to 1 commercial flag per lot, no maximum number of flags per lot for federal, state, county, or municipal flags. So it's possible that, does this pertain to a commercial business? So the commercial business could decide, I'm gonna have 6 flags of Texas, the 6 flags of Texas. They can have 6. So we're just gonna allow an unlimited number of those types of signs. I mean, they could basically cover their entire property with flags. Is that
I'll
what
go
we're
ahead and-
allowing?
I'll answer that based on the way our city administrator answered that exact question to planning and zoning. And that was that this is considered a freedom of speech issue and that we cannot limit the display of the United States or the Texas flag.
But you're not
because
limiting
there's-
it. I
Well,
mean,
no, we can't limit it. They can put 10 of them if they want to. What we can limit is the number of corporate flags that they put up, and that's why it's limited to 1.
That's crazy.
Is that your understanding? Yeah.
Is
So
that
they could-
true?
They can put up 40 American flags if they want to, but we can't say a word about it without violating their rights, but we can limit them to 1 corporate flag.
Well, that is the craziest thing I ever heard. Okay, that's fine. If it's the law, what do you do?
I don't know if there's any law
No,
per se
it's
about
case
it.
law, it's cases.
Yeah. If you start restricting it, I would imagine that could get sticky.
Well, when you start having people come and complain that the business next to them has 30, Texas flags, which,
They're not going to, but I
I
understand.
know. What we're trying to do is prevent these
Right.
kinds of things, but you can't prevent a lot of things, It's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. Okay, that was it. I think, everyone covered pretty much the things that, and I do commend you for making this a much, more concise. I did want to ask, was there anything in particular that has come through planning and zoning as far as signs? I know we've been seeing a lot of variance requests. Were a lot of those things addressed in this? A lot of those, are we still going to be seeing a lot of variance? Is this going to answer the questions, or?
Well, I don't think it's ever gonna answer all of them. When we started out, the direction that we were going was to hopefully make the sign ordinance more clear, concise, and easy to understand. I thought we'd done a pretty good job until this discussion.
No, it's wonderful.
It just goes to show you that you'll never get to that point. So I think, as some of you have said, we've shortened the ordinance, and we've also made some clarifications, but that's what this discussion is all about, is to find the things that we've missed. And I'm excited that you guys have put so much input into this, and we'll definitely come back next time with these changes, and then we'll look at it again. So it's going to take a couple of meetings, I think.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yeah,
Oh, I had a couple of things too.
well, just wait a second. No, I'm just kidding you. I'll get to you in just a second. Do you have any follow-up?
I don't believe so.
Ed, any follow-up? Alex?
The only thing I would mention is that we got in our agenda was that planning and zoning is still working on some additional information with regard to the structures that are not really signs, but that are not really designed for buildings. We've had a lot of those situations come up, not a lot, but enough, that, spires and cupolas and monuments and things of that nature, which we don't really regulate, so we don't know quite what to do with them. But your question, Councilmember Massey, was with regard to, does it eliminate that? Most of the exceptions that are coming to planning and zoning, really, they just want bigger and brighter and corporate, national corporate signs, and that's what they're coming to. And Planning and zoning has done a very good job with staff's assistance in trying to tone it down, and they're working with it. I mean, all of the businesses, they want to be here for the right reason, and they're working with the city by and large to get it to within our guidelines, so.
Okay.
And that's been evident in the last few that
Yes.
have come before you guys. Bert, anything else? And Cynthia? No follow-up? Okay, Frank, you're up.
Just a couple minor changes that I would recommend under page 9, 6647, political signage. On size, it says service area shall not exceed 32 square feet. State law allows for political signs. Cities cannot regulate signs that are up to 36 feet. If they're greater than 36, cities can regulate them. So I would recommend that be 36 feet, because state law prohibits cities from regulating municipal signs unless they're greater than 36 feet. Then you can
And
regulate.
where is that?
Number 2,
Number 2, under size, it
Page
says
9.
32 feet on page 9.
page 9, Tom.
That
Page
should be
9?
36 feet.
Okay,
Under political signage.
okay, got you.
And then the only other recommendation I had was on page 19, under non-conforming signage. Section C. There's no state law, but there's cases out there that a non-conforming use, right, it has to be a reasonable amount of time before non-conforming sign loses its non-conforming signage for not being in use. And cases have come back that say 6 months is a reasonable period. So I would recommend that that 90 days be moved to 6 months, because that's what cases out there have said.
Rick, you have that?
Those are my only 2 changes.
Appreciate it. Okay, one last call. No other questions or anything? Again, we appreciate what you helped us with tonight, and we'll bring it back at least one more time as discussion. So, Bert?
I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you, that's what I was going to ask. Are we going to finalize it next meeting?
No.
No.
I think
It's still
gonna
a
take-
fluid, it's a fluid?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
There's just too much to go through, so I'm
Yes, sir.
hoping that you guys will continue to go through it, bring us ideas.
Okay.
Feel free to notify Rick, Susan, or Selena by email if you see anything else, so that we can incorporate that before the next meeting as well.
Very good.
Okay, that takes us to item number 7. And this is discussion and action on the EDC fiscal year ending strategic work plan for 2018. So if I can have a motion and a second to discuss and take action on this, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on item number 7 as written.
I have a motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Buys. Cynthia, you're up first.
I had the pleasure of attending this work session with the EDC, and it was very informative and very well done and very put together by the staff and the individuals that came from, was it SAWS or?
The
CPS,
San Antonio
CPS.
Economic Development Foundation and CPS.
So I've already gone through it. I mean, I was here when they went through the priorities and what their goals were. And I think they did a really good job of selecting, how they went about selecting their goals. And so I'm very much for this. And I thought they did a really good job putting it together.
Bert?
Okay, I agree with Councilmember Massey. I attended the EDC meeting, and they went ahead and voted pretty quick on this and approved it. The one goal that I would really like to see, and unfortunately, it's the last goal, but I think in the atmosphere that's up at the legislative level now, I don't see us annexing many businesses in our ETJ, and I think an MDD would be a good thing to do as soon as we can, because that's the only way to get any tax revenue out of our businesses in the ETJ. I know it would take a lot of work. I'm not sure, but I'm sure it would take an election, and I think it would have to actually dissolve the EDC. Is that correct? I believe that's correct.
Yes, that's the belief that we have also.
Yeah, so I mean, I really look at goal number 6 should be a higher goal of the EDC, but hey, it's a great document, and I agree with Councilmember Massey. It's very well done. That's all I have.
Ed?
I've read this plan. It's a great plan. I'd like to say that my interests lie in the goal number 3, the external marketing and communication plan. I think that, you know, the marketing of, for example, Old Town, of an area that we've put some overlay restrictions on and put quite a bit of money, certificate money on it. We need to, you know, further that, and developing some kind of marketing plan that would promote or create traffic flow for those business owners in that part of town is critical. But I like the overall plan. Kudos to everybody that worked on this. The only other question I had was this visitor center, goal number 4, you know, midterm goal 2019 to 2020, identifying, I guess, a piece of property. Where would that, has anybody thought of where that property might likely be? Just whatever, we gotta look at whatever's available and identify cost, et
No
cetera.
work has been done.
No work's been on that just yet.
Or at this point.
Okay.
That was my one concern about the EDC making that a midterm goal. Personally, I think it's a long-term goal, but
Right,
that's what they elected to choose, so.
right.
Well, and Cynthia, when, I think she's the one that brought this up, that initiated it, she was thinking Old Town, probably if they could find something, but nothing's available down there, so.
Okay.
And I think also, the projected cost is probably gonna be a hindrance to the EDC and everybody involved.
Yeah. No, great job. Thank you.
Alex?
Thank you. I concur with all the other comments about the amazing work and obviously what went into it. I look forward to the completion of the water and sewer line, because I think that will help Old Town to develop as more and more people come to where the development that's going to result along Bandera Road, and I think that's going to help. And I think working on that external marketing communication plan in advance of that development might help it a little bit better, to plan some of that communication knowing that the other is happening and coordinate it to where it works. I too was interested in the visitor center concept, and if I'm not mistaken, we now, we have that hotel tax, and if I recall from the budget discussions, I couldn't find it, but that the hotel tax, one of the things that money can be spent on is the development of a visitor center, along with other community center type places. And I got to thinking that I recall a comment a citizen had made a while back about her bed and breakfast and being unhappy that she seems to be the only one that pays hotel tax, even though, because of course we don't have any hotels in the city limits. And then I got to thinking about all of what San Antonio is doing now with regard to their ordinances, with regard to Airbnb and other bed and breakfasts. And I'm not saying we need to go down that road, but maybe we do. And
We already are.
yeah, so I'm just saying,
We're enforcing our hotel occupancy tax on Airbnb, basically
Yeah.
anything that meets the definition of a hotel, which those homes appear to meet that definition. So we've already receded that dollar amount of hotel occupancy tax, but we've receded some checks. They're starting to come in.
And that's exactly what I was thinking when I saw this, about the visitor center and then the cost associated. I was hoping that if we go down that route, then that may be helping to generate some funds. Otherwise, I think it's a great plan. Thank you.
Paul?
Everything that I had really has already been discussed, so I'm good. I like the plan. Good job on that.
Okay, just, I had, what?
I guess the only other thing I really was just done a great job with Marketplace, our market days on Saturday. It's really become really a draw, and I think that's impressive. That's a commendation to you guys for making that happen and getting it to where it is.
Thanks. Couple of things that I had talked to Rick about, just on the cover sheet, where he has the two first names for technical support, to go ahead and spell out San Antonio Economic Development Foundation for people who read this and don't know what that is. And then I brought up on page 3 under history, I can understand the third line there where it says, we've gone from a small rural town, and then it says to a suburban bedroom community. And I don't think that's really what we are. A bedroom community by definition is an area mostly residential where people commute to other places to work and come home only to sleep. There's generally no businesses in a bedroom community. It's strictly residential. And so we had tossed around just taking out the bedroom and just say a suburban community, because we are a suburban city. And so, and I don't know whether we need to go back to the EDC to recommend that, but by definition, we're not a bedroom community. And then the only other thing I saw,
I'm just gonna make, because that's a nominal change.
Okay.
I'm just gonna make that change, 'cause
well, that's what I would think, but I don't know how everybody is dedicated to this. And then the last thing on page 8, reading through that, under goal 5 there, priority 1, projects. Second bullet point, it says, use social media, Helotes Magazine, and other methods to educate the general public. I think rather than educate, inform would be a better word, because educate sounds a little presumptuous. So I think just inform, because that's what we're trying to do with all of these things, is to inform the public. And that, other than that, I'm the same way. I was here and enjoyed the workshop and thought it was very productive. Cynthia, any follow-up? Bert?
No.
Ed?
No, sir.
Alex? Nothing? Okay, then we'll call the question. All in favor of approving the EDC fiscal year ending 2018 strategic work plan, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries, and item 7 is approved unanimously. Item number 8, we have a discussion and action requirement on the Old Town Special District Pedestrian Bridge Project. And we furnished you guys with quite a bit of information, but we'll answer your questions and explain exactly what's going on if there's a question. So if I can have a motion for discussion and action.
Mayor, I make a motion, we discuss and take action on 8.
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Massey. Bert, it's your motion, so you're up.
Okay, I attended the EDC meeting, and I agree with the EDC, and I will use their adjective. They reluctantly made the motion to approve, and reluctantly seconded, and they reluctantly approved it, said aye. Now, the reason they're doing that is because I believe this is the only, we're kind of in a rock and a hard place. We have to spend the money in order to move this project forward. The only thing is, we could possibly, from what their discussion was, from what I got from the meeting, was the span of the bridge is not going to be as long as it was before. Maybe we could save some money there, although it's got to be re-engineered. Maybe it's going to cost some money there to do that. But I think the gist I got from the meeting and listening to the commissioners was we have to do this if we want to move this project forward. So that's all I have on that.
Cynthia?
I've always had an issue with the way the EDC views its money situation. It has plenty of money to do this project. The money does not belong to the EDC. It belongs to the citizens, taxpayers of Helotes. We're here to use the money for the benefit of Helotes. So the EDC has the money for this project. With that said, I am, it bothers me about, FEMA coming in and saying, you can't do this, that you have to build a bridge 6 feet above the grade, and the floodplain, it's never flooded, it's never reached, in the history that everyone knows, it's never flooded, never reached the road. And yet they say we have to do this, but we have to pay to prove that this is not going to happen, which is typical. So I understand the angst of having to pay for something that we know is going to turn out the way we want it to, but there you go. Anyway, the EDC does have the money to do this. I'm glad that they did, even if they did it reluctantly, I'm glad that they did vote to move forward. Again, they don't have that many expensive projects at this point. And so this one is not that expensive. So this needs to be done. I'm glad they did it, and we need to move forward with it.
And we do have a map of the existing floodplain. You can't imagine the angst until you sit through a meeting with these entities and try to get some reasoning from them, because if you saw the flood study, the engineers, and to me, all of these numbers are theoretical. And when they say that the bridge at the level of the vehicle bridge, assuming worst-case scenario, will raise the total flood plain elevation by 3 to 4.5 inches, and you look at that floodplain, it goes up into Floor's store and would have covered Elf Industries, basically. So it's just never happened. Bert, you brought up a point. We can choose to wait until San Antonio River Authority does these new studies and everything, the modeling and mapping of the area, but we can't get an idea of when that's going to be. The other thing I was talking to Rick about is we're talking here and including a CLOMAR, which is the conditional letter of map revision, and the LOMAR, which is the letter of map revision. We believe that we can get this done with just the first one, the conditional letter, because as I explain here, that's a formal comment from FEMA as to whether a proposed project and the associated study comply with the minimum floodplain management criteria. So what we could do is get the CLOMAR, put the bridge in, and wait for them to do their study and see if that revises the map, and if it doesn't, then we can look at doing the LOMAR. And the reason this has come about, we were actually in the process of getting the abutments in place, and they called me, and I went out there and looked at it, and that's when it dawned on me that this is a leftover from the Linear Park project, and that design raised the bridge above the floodplain and created a problem where people driving on the vehicle bridge would actually be looking at the underneath of the pedestrian bridge, and that's when we decided we really can't do that. We've got to bring it down. And so I think it's just part of the process of having to deal with FEMA and this flood plain issue, and that's the reason we're bringing it to you guys. Okay, Ed, any input?
Well, I've had experience in dealing with FEMA, and yes, you have to pay to prove that it's not, it's contrary to their maps. Have we, I imagine that our engineers sought the FEMA maps, make sure they're up to date, and
Oh, yeah.
we're not having to spend money for no reason to prove that it's.
No, we
gonna be
had them
affected.
do the flood study,
Yeah.
which cost us a little bit of money, but we got them to reduce the price. And again, to me, it's all theoretical
Right.
information, but it's just it. And they wouldn't budge those 3 inches. And so
Wow.
that's why we're in the situation we're in, and just trying to proceed with this to make it happen.
Yeah. No, I like the project. I think it's going to bring, hopefully it'll bring some traffic, some interest to the Old Town. Again, we want to develop as much traffic for those business owners down there as we can, and make it, above all, safe for people to travel, across that area.
And the bridge company and the abutment company, Hill Country Bridge, are both on hold. They're well aware of what's going on. They're just waiting to see what happens.
Thanks.
Alex, anything?
Well, I think it's about time we get moving with the project, and I know that having to wait for them to do it with no guarantees of their outcome.
Right.
Puts it back even further. We've been wanting this anybody who's had to walk across that bridge between the two parts of Old Town knows how unsafe that is, because there's no sidewalk, and you're just walking in there hoping you don't get hit. So safety for me is one of the most important things. I'm kind of curious as to why a 3-inch different, or you say 6 feet, why we have to go all that difference. Can't we just go split the difference? And, it's either at the same level or 6 feet higher, and
They looked at all of that, and it really
that
doesn't make any difference.
The other thing that worries me, though, is that we're gonna end up spending the $50,000 to do this whole thing and find out that they were right. And then we're right back to where we were, having spent the money to do what they would have done anyway, because there's no guarantees that the result of the engineering work is gonna prove that that bridge isn't in a floodplain, especially as we do more and more and more development. Places are flooding that didn't flood 10, 20 years ago. And so that's my worry. I say we go with it, we do it, because it's gonna happen, we need to get it moving. But my worry is that we're gonna spend $50,000 to prove that we need the High Bridge anyhow.
Well, at
That's
this
all I have.
point, it'll just be the cost of the conditional letter of map revision, which
Not the
which
whole
is-
thing?
No.
Okay.
No, it's hopefully we'll get it all determined with that one expenditure, which, it's in here, I think it was around $14,000, something like that.
Thank you.
Paul?
It's a worthy project. Unfortunately, you hit these heartburn situations, and it gotta be done.
Cynthia, any follow-up?
No.
Follow-up?
I'd just like to say, whenever I said the EDC said reluctantly, I think it's not that about spending the money, it was who the money was going to. They were kind of frustrated by all this, and it's not about, spending the money. They were gonna spend it, but it's just, they were talking about all the things that, okay, why is that bridge 6 foot higher and the other bridges are still at the same height? Why they're stopping debris coming down? It's just giving the money to FEMA. That's what they weren't reluctant to spend it. They were just reluctant about this whole process.
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree. I
anyway,
get you.
that's all I had.
Ed, anything else?
No, sir.
Alex? Paul, anything? Okay, the last thing on this, we feel like this is part of the Old Town improvement, so we can use the C of O money that's available. It won't have to come out of the city or the EDC's coffers. And that's what we're shooting for now, is to use C of O money. Okay, no other discussion being required. We'll call the question. All in favor of approving the Old Town Special District Pedestrian Bridge additional work, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And this is going to take us into our closed session. For those of you that don't know, a closed session or executive session is where council goes into a closed session in another room. It's not an open meeting. We don't know how long we'll be in there. You're welcome to stay until we come out. But we're going into closed session in accordance with Texas Government Code 551.071, consultations with attorney, and 551.087, deliberations regarding economic development negotiations. In addition to these matters, any matter scheduled for open session may be discussed in closed session. And again, we're going into closed session, and we're going to do that at 8:21. And we will be back, hopefully, fairly soon. Session at 8:28. We went into closed session. Let me read this. We went into closed session in accordance with Texas Government Code 551.071, consultations with attorney, and 551.087, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations. No action was taken in closed session, and there is no need for action or discussion now. So we will pull item 10 as being unnecessary, and that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there any objection to adjourning the meeting? Hearing no objections, we will adjourn the meeting at 8:29.